jump into a panel discussion. Now going to introduce you the panelists, and I would propose that you give them a collective applause after I mentioned the 4 names and not for each one. So we already know Pietro Caloprisco, Project Officer at the Clean Hydrogen Partnership, so please come to the stage and grab yourself a microphone. Then I'm happy to have with us Geert Tjarks. He is Head of Business Development at EWE, and he happens to be a former colleague of us at NOW, so he was the head of the division Lorena is now working on. I don't think that you met, so he was already gone when you came. So then we have Nadine Hölzinger. I didn't see her so far. There she is. She's from Spillet, and Spillet is a lead from HyStarter 1 and part of HyStarter 2, and she was also a project lead for the PDA, Project Development Assistance, Pietro mentioned in his introductory statement. And last not least, we have Veronika Vohlidkova, and she's a member of the board of the Czech hydrogen technology platform HyTap. So now you can give them a round of applause and welcome them to the stage. So probably I'd like to start with you, Pietro. We heard in your introductory statement that has been quite a lot of interest in this second round of proposals for the hydrogen valleys from the European level. Could you elaborate on what makes you think where comes the interest from the renewed and higher interest in hydrogen valleys?
Hello? Yes.
Works.
Okay. Well, that's a good question. I think that a lot comes also from the groundwork that has been done throughout the years, and here also I don't know. Maybe Nadine will comment later on. I think that. As I was explaining earlier, already in 2016 we saw that the region had an interest toward the hydrogen technologies, but quite frankly, they didn't know much about it. And I think that this work of further explaining what can concretely be done helped to push them to go ahead with this project proposals. And also definitely the technology has advanced and has closed the gap in terms of costs with the incumbent technologies. So we see in some applications that it can be quite interesting to switch to hydrogen. There is also tighter regulation at local level for air pollution and so on and so forth, which is opening the market for this type of applications. Concretely then also what may have triggered the interest of the region may be also the funding that was made available. So it was an incentive to understand, okay, now there is a really concrete interest. They're really looking at us as a tool to deploy the technology. So the focus is not so much on the innovation of the technology, it's really about the cities and regions, which from the beginning have always been a key player in realizing any goal of the European Union, 2020, 2030, and 2050. And seeing this dedicated support and this dedicated attention may have triggered really their interest in joining these complex projects. And I also think what we heard, we recently also had a workshop dedicated, to the region's hydrogen valleys, where we were trying to get some feedback from the local realities. And they mentioned that, even the effort of sitting around together, around the table with all the stakeholders, to put together a proposal, that's a very good, powerful catalyzers. You see that there are sometimes even large corporates that are taking part in these projects, and they could do it on their own. But even then, they say, look, it's really important for us, when you put out this call for proposals, because it really allows us to sit all down together, that if we had to do this on our own, it wouldn't be so straightforward. So I think there is not like one key element. It was the combination of several elements that came together, the political attention, the support, and the maturity of the technology that made it so that right now we are at a good spot for the regions to come into play and to start to play a bigger role. And now we are quite anxious to get started with this valley. We are just at the beginning. As I said, we are signing now these grants for these projects. And I can tell you already now that if you look at how many unknowns there are, it's a little bit scary, because the projects are good, but as any of you will know, there are still quite some difficulties when it comes to the local regulation, the availability of the technology. Imagine like a small reality that, for example, you know, they want to integrate hydrogen in their municipal fleet. Well, they have to go to get the guy that gives you the hydrogen, then the one that gives you the HRS, the other one that gives you the vehicles. It's quite an exercise. So let's see how this will go. We are confident, but
we will dive into the obstacles during our discussion. But one thing you mentioned, for the reasons of the interest, was this early stage assistance, and this brings me to you. Move on to Nadine. This is what you did with the PDA project, and so Pietro said that probably now these are already fruits of your work, that there are so many people now applying for the next round of Hydrogen Valley. So what are the main success factors for this early stage assistance?
Yeah, I think maybe it's not only PDA, but it was also HyStarter. We saw in the projects already that the spotlight that was just brought to the regions by becoming a PDA region, by becoming a HyStarter region, just initiated contacts with industry, with investors from the EU taxonomy. So we had one region in the PDA and also in the HyStarters. They were just approached by investors, and they understood that there's an economic benefit to the region aside from a single interest project of a hydrogen industry. So because in the beginning it was just like stakeholders of the hydrogen industry who wanted to do a demonstration project. So, and then this grew, and now regions understand that there's an economic benefit to them, because they understand that there's, as you said, that there's money in the system, that they have to develop, that they have to adapt to climate change, they have to adapt to the energy crisis, they have to just take back the control over energy production, consumption, pricing, and I think so. We saw in the first, it was the investors who came, and then we saw that it was the energy crisis that just brought back the awareness that there's a responsibility of a region to just have energy, fair energy prices, sustainable energy systems, not being dependent on imports, on whatever. So they want to take back the control, and this is what happens. But we also see that when looking at hydrogen valleys and regions, that we have still, and this is where we came from, that we have still regions that are kind of like only the location of a hydrogen valley and not more, so that it's mainly industry driven. But we also have, and we see more and more regions who have like, who want to become a hydrogen ready region. So they go into the special planning, they go into the qualification of the public administration, of the approval authority. So they kind of prepare the ground for these investments to come, for the industry to succeed. So this is the role that regions can take in the future.
Yeah. Thank you. Pietro was talking of the usual suspects in the presentation earlier, and I think the Czech Republic is not one of the usual suspects, and it's one of the new players in the game. And Veronika, I understood that what you're just doing in the Czech Republic is very similar to what we are trying here in Berlin, Brandenburg, and Saxony, where there's the so-called Lausitz region, where there was a lot, or still is a lot of lignite, and the task is to transform a former lignite region into a region that produces renewable energy and hydrogen, transforms to a hydrogen region. So can you tell us about the project you are conducting in the Usti region?
Yes, Geert, you are right. We have just to let you know, we have 3 coal regions in Czech Republic. the Ústí region, which is very active in the field of developing the hydrogen economy. We have Moravskoslezský region, which is also active. And last month, Karlovarský region has signed a memorandum of understanding with these two regions. So all the three regions are trying to be active. The Ústí region is really far away. They are, for almost 1 year, they have approved their regional hydrogen strategy, and we can see a lot of promising projects to be developed there. There is a lot of know-how in the field of energy production, transport, chemical industries. There are refineries which are promising, or there is a potential to produce hydrogen. So there is an industrial area, Žatec. There is a big project which is currently being planned and projected to be launched, I think, next year. There should be an electrolyzer to be built. There should be a solar farm of, I think, 300 megawatts. There should be a filling station. Gas distribution operator is planning to blend the hydrogen in this region in the connection with this industrial zone. There should be some kind of research and development center and technology center. So we are awaiting, or the firms connected in this project are awaiting the cost of about 1 billion of crowns. So it's a huge project. And also, for example, Ústí region and the public transport operator is planning to buy, or they already signed an agreement to buy 20 hydrogen buses within next year. The plan is to have approximately 90 public transport buses in till 2030. So I know that also Ústí region is quite well connected and cooperating with Saxony region. So these are the main points, I'm thinking, to the Ústí region.
It's an interesting point that you are cooperating with Saxony, but what you just told us is these are all the ingredients you need for Hydrogen Valley. So did you apply for the European funding with the Ústí region?
They are applying. They are trying to get the money from Just Transition Fund.
Ah, okay.
As the call former region, I'm not sure whether they are trying to get the money from you. Maybe yes.
Yeah, you should try both, probably.
I will ask. And it was quite interesting also to hear about the HyLand project, because it's really interesting and inspiring for us as well, because for Czech Republic, you all know that it's a big transit country regarding the gas infrastructure, and all gas companies are trying to be really prepared for hydrogen. So they are testing gas infrastructure. They are making some investments. So this will be also something that will be changing within the Czech Republic. So our companies are working on that. It's not so far and so huge and big, maybe as here in Germany. We are looking on the Germany or Western Europe projects, but from my point of view, we are, let's say, 5 years in delay.
Okay. So let's indeed move to the question of cross-border activities, and then this brings me to Geert. I mentioned earlier that EWE is part of our first high performer, one of our first high performers. But I saw your logo in the presentation of Deborah, so you seem to be involved there too. Can you explain what kind of cooperation you have with the Netherlands in this case?
Sure. So yeah, we are the Hydrogen Valley, which is called Highways for Future, which is based actually in the northern western part of Germany, pretty close to the Dutch border actually. So basically we can see Groningen from our side, and because Groningen and Heaven is a pretty mature project on the European level, it was pretty obvious to you know, collaborate and see if we can do something together. And we did that actually in the first phase more on the partner level, more on the strategic level. But the idea was actually, and we applied for the large valley call last year, to actually create a cross-border valley to combine both valleys like Heaven and Highways for Future. By the way, between our region and the Netherlands is the region of Emsland, H2 Region Emsland. They were part of the application as well. We included Denmark at that stage. So the idea was actually to combine all these existing valleys and create, let's call it a large-scale valley. We were not successful, by the way, but that is, I would say that's understandable because we are pretty mature at this point, and I see that we need to support further valleys across Europe, so that's fine. But still, the question is, how can we actually combine specific projects to really create a European hydrogen economy? That is crucial. IPCEI, for example, could be an argument as well. And how can we combine IPCEI and the valleys to really create a European hydrogen economy and not have specific, not interlinked projects across Europe, right?
So this might be the problem of the hydrogen valley approach. So the initial idea is that you have these hubs, and then in the next step they have to grow together somehow. But if they are not interlinked, and if they not are using, for example, the same regulations, then this might cause problems. So then, probably question for you, Pietro. What is the idea from the Clean Hydrogen Joint Undertaking to make sure that all these valleys that you are funding all over Europe, that they can be combined and work together?
Yeah, that is indeed quite a challenge.
In 2 minutes.
In 2 minutes, okay. Well, I think that we're pretty much still thinking about it because the reality is, you know, that the things are evolving really fast in the hydrogen sphere, not only for the valleys. I mean, roll back the clock 3 years ago, we were the only kids in the garden to play with hydrogen at European level. I mean, we had exchanges with a number of other institutions, such as yourself, but, you know, we're discussing low TRL, what are you doing with the membrane? No, that's what we're doing. And trying to avoid the overlap. Now, you know, there is a lot of interest, political interest, and at European level, you have like several joint undertakings that are dealing with hydrogen. You have the Commission with their Choose Zero program, for example, RTD directly. Then you have the AFIR, you have the IPCEI. It's a wealth of programs. It's a lot of money that is rushing into the sector, and it's true that indeed we have to make some sense of it. No? Otherwise, there is the risk of wasting money, funds, because we are not putting them down in a rational way. So behind the curtains in Brussels, there is a lot of coordination going on, and also you will see it transpiring in some of the requirements of our calls, because we are asking, you know, when it comes to the valleys, okay, you have to show us, for example, how you want to create links with other existing valleys. This is one of the requirements. So we want to see like how many lessons learned you are taking from the existing valleys, but also you want to try to link up with these other valleys. And then, you know, if we look also at the level of funding, for example, we are asking, okay, you know, with our funds, there's no way that we are minority shareholders in this valley. We are giving like 20 or 9 millions according to the valley size, but these investments are 100 millions, we heard, for one valley. So clearly, the entities that are involved are not relying only on our funds. They will also need funds at national level. So also there, for example, we are taking some initiatives like providing the Seal of Excellence to start to try to create a link between what we are doing in Brussels and what is happening at national level. But other than that, there are quite some few difficulties that remain. Because, for example, if we can try to align between the European programs, it becomes more difficult when there is the coordination to be done between the European and the national funds. The requirements are different, the timelines are different, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done to make it easier for those that are applying and also for us. Because imagine when we receive a proposal, and you know, as I said, like we are providing a minority fund for what you need. And then the rest has to be funded through national programs. And all of a sudden you have a proposal where, like, I don't know, there are 10 elements, 3 are funded by us, and the other is depending on what is happening at national level. And you have no guarantee, and the moment you're assessing your proposal, that the rest of the pieces of the puzzle will be there. So what do? You take the risk, go ahead. You're the public authorities, that's your task. But if you fail, you blocked 20 million of public funding on a project that is not going to go ahead. So this link is still a difficulty for those that are applying and for those that are assessing, and work needs to be done there. At European level, we are going ahead. We can get it done. But between the European and national level, I still see problems.
Let me pass this question on to Nadine, because you were working both at the European level and here in Germany at our HyLand projects. What are your thoughts about this problem of these scattered approaches?
So this is what we also see. So we had regions who were ready to apply for funds, and then the national funding timeline was just passed, but they were not ready, and then they got the second one, and so it was kind of matching funds is always difficult. It's also difficult that, and I think we are pretty good in that at the moment, and the regions are mature enough to understand that they will not just try to do projects that fit to a funding program. So this was in the beginning. So they said, okay, so there's a bus funding, so we're going to do buses. So there's a station funding, we're going to do stations. And what we are going to do is what we try to do with all these regions to say, okay, so what's your need? What's the benefit? What do you want to do? And then just in a second step, check the funding programs, but not align your project to just outrageous funding that's out there, because this was in the beginnings, they were hunting for funds, and now they need to have the idea first, and then they need to check, okay, so what parts of it can be funded when, so to have a funding strategy. As we saw that there are also private investors who just jump in, but then it's always a problem when they just are ready and they get funds, and I guess that there may be some of the HyLand applications here who are just in the situations who had an unsuccessful application. So the question is what to do, as you said, with the rest of the pieces of the puzzle. So if one of the pieces is just failing, so will they implement, will they get the stakeholders' engagement, will they get the political support? Then you have elections, you have a different party, whatever. So it's always a very risky dance of when and how to implement it. But what I wanted to add with also with the cross-border, so at the moment there's an initiative, so regions are also using more and more of the Interreg programs to do hydrogen, and so there's an initiative also with Poland and with the Czech Republic and with Germany, led by Berlin-Brandenburg, by the Joint Special Planning Department, on hydrogen-ready regions. So in order to align cross-border, the rollout of the hydrogen economy, the policies, where is infrastructure set up, not to invest itself, but to just prepare the ground to do like the steering of everything, because they want to avoid that they just get overwhelmed by industry and by infrastructure set up. They want to steer it, they want to manage it, and to just share the scarce resources, the capacities, the maintenance, the expertise throughout like a corridor from in Central Europe. So this is what they also are doing without investing, without having hydrogen valleys, but they are starting to talk to each other to plan, to steer, in order to not compete with projects, because this was also in the past that everybody was competing with everybody else without having like a regional perspective on the issues.
Concerning the different timelines you just mentioned, Geert, when we were talking before the discussion, you told me that that the uptake of the hydrogen economy is about to get exponential, and that all the instruments that the political instruments we are trying to apply are more linear, and this doesn't fit. Can you tell us a little bit about of the obstacles you are facing with EWE in the different projects you're in?
Yeah, so as you said, processes on the political level are right now pretty slow, actually. I give you one example, the IPSAI projects, and maybe one word before. I think looking ahead, what can be solved or what can help actually to accelerate the valleys is to acknowledge the activities happening on the hydrogen supply side on the European level, right? So we see a lot of activities coming from IPSAI, from PCI, from the Hydrogen Bank. We see the Hydrogen Backbone Initiative. So if you ask me, I would say in 4 to 5 years, hopefully, we have at a lot of locations we have access to a cheap or competitive green hydrogen, right? So maybe these valleys can be more focused on the application side, on the end use side. And the problem, and now we are at the timeline. The problem is we need to challenge the supply side, right? And that is pretty slow. And now come back to IPSAI. We proposed the IPSAI project, I think 4 years ago or 3 years ago, and still we are in the application process. Still we are not notified to actually start. We could have started, I would say 2 years ago or something. But every time we say we have to accelerate, the process seems to be much more precise. So it gets, instead of speeding up, it gets more precise, and that makes it even slower. And so, as I said, if we solve the supply side, that would be a big advantage for the valley, because they can be much more focused on the end-use sector, which would be, yeah, maybe accelerate.
Yeah, I would like to add the demand side to that picture too, because what we saw, for example, in HyStarter now, is that we have industry, like large industry, a large energy-consuming industry, and they are willing and ready to support the rollout. They are willing and ready to pay a little bit more, but for the moment they are not allowed to, because it's not, so they can't have the greenhouse gas certificates. So they need to stick to the regulation, and they need to have a solution, and the policy is not in place yet. So they would like to pay, they would like to do, as an example, so at the moment, at least in Germany, they are not allowed to just get, as they did with biogas or with eco-electricity or whatever, so they can't pay somebody, for example, in your region, to feed hydrogen into the gas grid and to get it in the south of Germany out of the gas grid and have like a certificate for green gas. So this is not allowed at the moment. They would do it at once. They could support the economies of the rollout of the production side, of the supply side, but they're not allowed to. So they will go into other solutions. They will go into electric solutions, because at the moment they need to just stick to the regulation, and there is no role of hydrogen yet in there. So, and this is a problem that we face too.
Yeah, but I think I know it's much too slow, or the regulation side, and there's still big questions ahead, but in the end, I hope by the end of this year, we will have a finished Fit for 55 package, and probably the infamous delegated acts are transferred into national law too, so then the regulation side should be there. Still much too slow, but yeah, we have to be happy about the small steps ahead that are happening. But Veronika, if you hear that, you just told us that your estimation was that the Czech Republic is lagging behind. You said about 5 years, and you told me before that the Czech government is working on an update of a national hydrogen strategy. So what are you proposing should be in there then to cope with these things you just heard?
Yes, it's quite interesting what is now happening in the Czech Republic from our point of view, because as I was hearing other panelists, the future of hydrogen, or when we want to start with the hydrogen, we need local and integrated project. It's chicken egg problem. We need production and we need consumption. We have to connect it together. They have to know about it. So we are supporting this. We are trying to really being heard about this. And as you mentioned, the national hydrogen strategy is currently being updated. We had our national strategy 2 years old, and it was quite a long strategy, having 90 or maybe 100 pages, very descriptive, without any concrete specific goals. And it was maybe good 2 years ago when the discussion has begun in the Czech Republic. But now we feel within Czech Hydrogen Technology Platform, we have grown a lot within 2 years from 90 to 80 member companies. So the interest is there, but and we feel there is a momentum. But we are missing a clear target from the national government. So we are pushing to make to persuade the government to really change the structure, to get their targets. We know the legislation on the European level is or will be finalized. We have clear targets, and we need that these European targets will be concretized on the national levels. So we have to know how many green hydrogen Czech Republic want to have within 2030, where it will be, where the green hydrogen will come from. It will be produced and where and how much. And if not, it will be imported from where. For which cost, which projects will be supported by the government? Are there any strategic projects that the government will put focus on? We do not know this. So we are in a hard discussion with the Ministry of Industry and Trade. We are discussing this Ministry of Environment, which we see that there is much more interest within this ministry. So it's much more easy to talk with them. There will be an update of all another strategies in the Czech Republic, state energy concept, national energy plan, the politics for climate protection, and all these national strategic documents will be updated within this year. So there is a huge work ahead of us. We need that this strategic materials will be consistent, will be supporting each other, will be clear, will have defined targets, and all this should be done within a few months. So we hope that the ministry will hear the voice of industry and business partners, and we will have it. So we will see.
So good luck for that, persuading your government for ambitious hydrogen goals. Let me come back to what Geert was just mentioning. Yeah? So we were proposing that the hydrogen valleys should focus more on the application side. Brings me to the question probably to all the panelists. Is probably, or are things happening so fast that the hydrogen valley approach should be rethought? Question. Geert, would you like to start?
Well, no. I mean, in the end, the idea of the valleys is still very valid, right? Because we all tend to think we have a market because a lot of things are happening, but in real life there is no existing market, but it's in preparation, and so still I think these networks and bringing together stakeholders make sure that you are prepared when something is happening, right? So if for example the hydrogen supply side is solved, we have to be in place. I mean, as you just said, we have an exponential market, and that needs preparation, right? So if we always start at the next point when we solve the next step and then see the next problem, that will slow down. So of course the valleys need to be prepared for the next steps. And still, I think focus is one key aspect, and to make sure that we are not doing something in parallel which doesn't need to be in parallel. For example, for the Harvest for Future project, we are just deploying a 2 megawatt system. At the same time, we are deploying for IPSAI a 300 megawatt system, right? And if you bring these 300 megawatt in operation, it's really questionable if the 2 megawatt are still or is still competitive, right? Yes. And that needs to be considered for the next steps. But again, the valley approach is still crucial. Yeah.
Okay, Pietro, your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts. I think now the valley is really a blessing for the industry, for the development and the deployment of the technology, but sometimes I'm a little bit worried on how these valleys are perceived, right? Because you can look at it two ways. You can look at it as a booster for the technology, for its development, because you're increasing the numbers, you're attracting investments, you're inching closer and closer to the mass production that you need to also lower the cost. At the same time, there is also expectation from those that are jumping into these valleys, for example, local authorities, that sometimes they have the idea that, well, you know, a diesel or a hydrogen bus will be the same thing. No, there is some development that still needs to happen at the level of the technology. And here, you know, there is this elephant in the room, the hype about the hydrogen. We are pushing a lot, but we should also manage expectations, especially for those that are implementing at the local level. As I mentioned earlier, for example, from the industry side, sometimes, unless I'm missing something, you know, you want to integrate in your fleet the hydrogen solution, well, you have to find the guy that gives you the bus or the trucks, the one that gives you the hydrogen, the one that gives you the HRS, and that can make it sometimes a bit of a painful project. I mean, I have projects in my portfolio where, you know, the truck was delayed, and when finally the truck arrived, the mobile HRS, the leasing was expired, so it was gone, so then you had to wait another 6 months. In the meanwhile, the truck got damaged because it was sitting there doing nothing. So we have to perceive the valley still as a way to really push the technology, but also be aware that we are in the phase where we are not there with the cost and the TRL of some of the applications. Yeah. And also in terms of manufacturing, the manufacturing of the components that we need for mobility, for example, we are not there yet. We don't have automatic, you know, building of stacks or fuel cells. The numbers are exploding, the demand will be there, but can we keep up also with the demand? I'm sorry, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I'm looking at it from the program that is dedicated to research and innovation, and I see we have 1 billion, and it's not for nothing. It's because there is still quite a few challenges to be seen there. So the valleys are great, but we have all to enter into these projects with the idea that, okay, we're going to get some benefits, but I have to put something in the basket in terms of waiting and putting my own effort for these things to happen. And then we will get all the benefits. But really now I think that it's good to think about the next step, but for us, we will put our heads down and make sure that this valley gets implemented, because I don't want to reopen the issue of the problems, but there's quite a few things to chew before we get to the next phase.
Probably we get back then to the cross-border question. So again, question to all of the panelists: what is the most important step or issue that has to be undertaken now to push cross-border activities under the hydrogen or among the hydrogen valleys? Somebody, Nadine?
Yeah, maybe the first one would be to stop competition between regions. So to share, because the problem I see in many of the regions is that on the one side they want to be big in order to get the funds and get the programs and the funding and so on, and the other side they have no experience yet. So when we look at, I don't know, Hamburg or Cologne, where they started with the buses, they started with 10 or 20 and one station and so on. So, and now we see regions who have never done anything and they come with 100 buses. So, and then we need to just make sure that they know what they're doing, but on the same side, we also see that they are competing for technologies. And we have many regions who say, okay, when we are asking for a supplier that we want to have 20 buses, they are laughing at us. That we want to have a 10 megawatt electrolyzer, we won't get it because they want to sell, I don't know, 100 megawatt electrolyzers to a green
scale.
steel project, megawatts, yeah, to a green steel project or whatever. So it's kind of, there's so much demand in the system for technologies so that I would say the sustainable sound, maybe smaller scale project in the regions, they need in order to grow, in order to learn from each other. There's no supply of technologies at the moment. It's what you said. So they are kind of hungry for technologies. We already had one region, they wanted to have 200 trucks. They didn't get it. It was too small. It was not important enough. So, and now we see, and also for the buses, we saw it in the past. So there are so many regions, they want to have technologies, and the suppliers can't supply all these numbers that are requested. So, so they are competing. And so the question is, and this is also for the cross-border part, that they should kind of also share expertise, share infrastructure. So they don't need on each side of the border, they don't need to have like a maintenance hub and an electrolyzer hub, but maybe they can just share production, they can be backup for each other in order to not have like a higher scale than required infrastructure set up at the beginning.
This what you just said is a competition between the different funding approaches of the European Union. So the IPCEI projects, they are the ones, they are funding the big or huge electrolyzers, for example, and this leads to the Hydrogen Valley regions not being able to get them because they're sold to the bigger projects.
Yeah,
what can we do about this?
Technology competition, and maybe another aspect is demand competition, right? I mean, there was an aspect in the large valley call which said we had to, I think 20% of the capacity produced had to be traded cross-border, which is totally understandable, of course, but usually you really are challenging to get the demand in your ecosystem on your domestic region, right? So you have to give up the demand side, which is actually something you need for your own projects, right? So that was a challenge. At the same time, maybe give you an example for our region. There will be a pipeline connection from Germany to the Netherlands by Hassuni in 2027, which is literally for the energy system that's tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. But still, there are a lot of open questions regarding standards, regarding quality, balancing, trading, cross-border trading. So these aspects, again, for me, it's pretty important to anticipate these aspects, which will be important for, I would say, in the next 4 years or something, and that not to be on the current state and see what can we do today, but we have to anticipate what will happen in the next 4 years, right? And be prepared for that. And maybe the valleys can have a support on that level as well, right?
Okay.
When I look on our regions and their cross-border cooperation, there is a lot of discussions with our counterparts. But from my point of view, the problem is maybe how you can offer something practical when you do not have the support in-house. For example, we have been spoken about the legislation and the regulatory framework. We are now discussing the fact that building an electrolyzer within the Czech Republic, it's considered as having a chemical plant. So you need a lot of permissions, a big area, and it takes a lot of time, efforts, and so on. And so we are trying, or the discussions are at the beginning to really change the perspective. We have been waiting also for the definition of hydrogen as an energy gas in the Energy Act, and we have been hearing from the ministry for 1.5 years. You should wait. This is not a priority. We have to make another amendment. So I know that there were energy crisis, and our Energy Act was amended 6 times within the last years, and we all understand it. But if we want to push and develop a hydrogen economy, there is no time to wait on the local and national level. So maybe to summarize, maybe some fear or doubts on our local regions, what we can offer in practical way to our cross-border partners. if we are not sure what will be happening or defined within the Czech Republic.
And what we are doing in the PDA project, so because there's also this observer network, which is a kind of a cross-border network, and what we try to do, so maybe in a year we know if it worked or not, is to exchange lessons learned on the administration process, on how to estimate risks, for example, of a station, because we have many of the regions who don't have the policies in place yet. So they don't have a hydrogen policy or whatever. So all those public authorities and approval authorities, they need to approve technology without a sound legal background. So they need to just say, okay, so maybe this is related to the gas infrastructure and this is related to some other infrastructure, but there's no policy yet in place. So they need to learn from other countries. So we want to connect them with regions who have already gone through the process, who maybe have the legislation, the policies in place, and then to just, to have a peer-to-peer exchange on that, because as you said, we can't lose time and reinvent the wheel every time in every region that we have, because there's expertise in other regions, and maybe they help being also more optimistic about how to set up and how to approve projects.
Okay, so in the end, it's still regulation, it's still permitting processes, it's still setting ambitious national targets and moving forward with that. At this point, I'd like to stop because the State Secretary is about to come in a couple of minutes. Switch back to Germany. Ich würde Sie gerne noch kurz, weil wir jetzt den ganzen Ablauf umschmeißen mussten, will ich Ihnen gerne kurz die Chance geben für eine 10-minütige WC- und Kaffeepause, bevor wir dann tatsächlich um 12 Uhr dann mit der High-Performer-Verleihung anfangen. Deswegen an dieser Stelle ganz herzlichen Dank an die 4 Panelisten und bitte nochmal einen großen Applaus für die. Und dann würde ich sagen, nutzen Sie jetzt die kurze Pause so gut wie möglich.